Good day, folks. It's Tony Fortunato from the technology firm. I'm running into this issue a little more often than not, so I'm going to share this example with you and hopefully it'll help you out. Now, for everybody out there that starts to moan and groan, I don't have an Aircheck from NetAlly, it doesn't matter. So as I say in the write-up, even if you don't have a NetAlly Aircheck G3, I encourage you to go through the steps with your favorite wireless tool, and I'm going to almost guarantee you that in most cases you're going to find something going on. So enjoy. So before we get started troubleshooting, you should always investigate, make notes, or interrogate, however you want to say it. In this case, with my NetAlly Aircheck G3, I'm going to use their Wi-Fi app. Again, even if you don't have an Aircheck, do that part. And your app should be able to identify the SSID, and in this case, the channels being used. The BSSIDs are obviously a bonus, but whatever you got, great. If you don't have it, then make sure you figure out how to get that information. So in this case, this SSID is broadcasting on channels 1 and 44, which implies that we are broadcasting on 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. Good to know. As I stated in the write-up, there are increasingly, I'm going to say it's a common practice now, to have a single SSID with multiple bands and multiple BSSIDs and just one great big glob of a network, right, made up of all these various components. So you're going to probably need to be able to isolate and separate and troubleshoot specific bands or specific BSSIDs to make sure everything's working, right? Because everything is kind of making up for the other one, and sometimes things are not working right and it's hard to track. In this case, I'm using the Aircheck to basically configure a specific band, right? But the first thing was the investigate. So I'm proving to myself that the tool can connect and test at the auto settings, because I want to make sure the tool is compatible with the network and there's nothing goofy going around with the way I've configured my wireless network, right? In this case, it connected just fine, and we're on channel 44, which implies 5 gig, right? And by default, the unit will connect in any band, because that is the default. So make sure you figure out how the tool behaves in your environment first before you start troubleshooting, all right? So now here is where, with the Aircheck, I basically created something called a Wi-Fi profile. I've done a whole other video on that. It's pretty simple stuff. And in this profile, I specified 2.4 gigahertz band only, right? So instead of the default any band, I'm trying to manually and statically code the band that I want to connect on. And as I said in the write-up, with Windows, depending on your wireless drivers, you might be able to do this, right? You should be able to do this. You never know. It depends until you try it. I've seen a lot of drivers where you put 2.4, it says 2.4, but when you connect, it's still on auto. That's a whole other mess. So please make sure you test this out with your tool, again, before you start troubleshooting, right? Do all this stuff at your desk first before you get sucked into a problem with your tool. So in this case, just to back up a little bit, we only have one BSSID, one access point, one physical access point using 2 bands. So I didn't have to worry about statically coding a BSSID. If you wanted to do that, you could also do that, but I'm not doing that, right? We're trying to keep this example as simple as possible. So we're trying to test both bands on the same access point, all right? So now that I've tested the 2.4 gigahertz, I found out, hey, look, it failed, right? So at auto, it worked, but it chose the 5 gig channel. The device was broadcasting on 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. But now when I statically and manually chose 2.4 gigahertz, I cannot connect. All right. Everybody who knows me knows I'm not a big fan of rebooting anything. In this case, let's reboot. Why not, right? So the test solution was to reboot. But you had to make sure you did all those previous steps just to document what's going on, just to document the behavior of the tool in the network, and the initial results. Now, I did reproduce this problem 3 times. So after 3 times, just to make sure it wasn't the tool and it wasn't some kind of anomaly or whatever, I came to the conclusion that, you know what, I don't have access to this wireless access point, so why don't I just try rebooting it, see what happens. So I rebooted the device, And then guess what? It's successfully connected at 2.4 gigahertz. Now here's the thing. You got to pay attention, because I had any network on there and I had the device configured for another network. And if you notice, this says 2 networks. And up until now, it was Spectrum. So this was kind of a mistake, but kind of nice in a way. It was good though, because it also proved that I can connect to this network at 2.4 gigahertz. Even though I made a mistake, it actually benefited me, because now I know the tool can connect to the network using just 2.4 gigahertz, and it's not a problem with the tool. So now let's see what happens when we try the same test with the original access point that had the issue. So now that I'm actually looking at the correct SSID, which I'm telling you right now, especially with wireless troubleshooting, this happens all the time. I don't mind leaving this in there. I was going to take that slide out originally. I go, no, wait a minute. That's what happens in the field. Troubleshooting wireless, you have things set for any, and other things pop up, and there you go, right? So back to this guy, this SSID. We have it specifically set for 2.4 gigahertz, rebooted it because it didn't work, and now all of a sudden the tool could connect to it. Now we want to make sure, look, it says channel 1, which implies 2.4 gigahertz, right? It actually got connected to it, and it got an IP address. So it's fully functional. Now here's the fun part. So I call the cable company and I say, hey, look, something weird's going on ever since we got this router. And of course they start asking me questions about your computer. Have you tried rebooting it? What's the barometric pressure in your house, and all that kind of stuff. So after we get past all that, I knew nothing good was going to come out of it. I spoke to the neighbor. He's having the exact same problem with his wireless printers dropping off the network, and those printers are all 2.4 gigahertz. In his case, I walked over, gave him a hand, and wired the printers into the home router, because he had the ports and the printers could be wired as well as wireless. So he's kind of fixed with that workaround. In my case, I went back to this other wireless access point that I happen to have, and I replaced the ISP's wireless network with mine, which has proven to be rock solid. So there's obviously something wrong with it. I don't know if there's a firmware upgrade or something coming down the pipe sooner or later, but for now I've disabled the internet provider's wireless and I am using my own gear.